We were in the Army, U.S. Army infantry for 5.5 years, and I was a military veteran of the Afghanistan war. And after the military, I went on to earn my master's degree in electrical engineering. And then I chose to continue serving the nation by working for Sandia National Laboratories. And Sandia is one of our federally funded research and development laboratories, an FFRDC, and it's one of only 3 national nuclear laboratories in the nation. And they also handle the nation's most difficult and sensitive national security challenges, like a lot of your top secret research projects and things like that. And so they are who the nation turns to when they want something seemingly impossible done. And they're absolutely critical to our national security. So for years, I had this honor of working alongside some of our best and brightest and working on some of the coolest stuff. I thought for an electrical engineer, it was a dream job. But then, as our story goes, in early 2020, and this is about 5 years after I'd begun working for Sandia National Laboratories, I discovered that critical race theory was spreading quickly throughout our organization. And this was months before anyone really was turned on to what critical race theory was as far as going mainstream. And even we didn't have words to put to what ideology this exactly was inside of our national laboratories. We just knew that it was wrong. And my wife and I both immediately went to work deciding that we needed to shine a light on what was happening in our national laboratories. This was happening across the nation in corporations as well.
What's funny is in the middle of our research is when we came across the article written by Chris Rufo, who had done, somebody else from Sandia had reached out to him about the white males as full diversity partners trainings that they were doing at the leadership levels. And so
they'd done it for like 3 years in a row.
Yeah.
So this had been coming. It just hadn't reached members of the workforce yet. It had just been in the management level and below.
But in that article, he referenced it as critical race theory, and that was the first time we had heard that phrase.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so we both went to work like immediately kind of debunking this theory that we saw as extremely racist and sexist. And we were shining a light on what this was doing to our national laboratories. And originally, this was intended materials that I was going to present to Sandia National Laboratories. I went back and forth all the way up and down the chain of command between HR, ethics, legal. It went all the way up to the president of labs, talking to them about I wanted to present to the national laboratories, put on a class that was the counter to what they had been presenting, saying, look, I think you've presented misinformation. Either we end these trainings or you have to allow me to teach the other side of this. Either way, I would like to get politics. Ideally, I'd like to get politics completely out of our national laboratories. And they have no place here. And after about 4 months, they told me, you've been heard. Thank you for your concerns. We're going to keep doing what we're doing and sit down, shut up, and get back to work. And so family is kind of everything to us. And our adopted son also happens to be a minority, and his race is the least important thing about him. So we refuse to raise one of our children to believe that they are an oppressor while raising the other to believe that they are a victim. And months after we went back and forth with them in August of 2020, after every other avenue had been exhausted, we blew the whistle on Sandia National Laboratories by mass emailing that video that we created out to all 16,000 employees and contractors in their email directory. And then over the next weeks, the words critical race theory, this was the time the words critical race theory began to enter the political consciousness of the media and most Americans. People actually started hearing it everywhere, and it seemed like overnight at the flip of a switch within even a couple of weeks. And I remember you reached out to me almost immediately, and we had the interview smack dab in the middle of this between us blowing the whistle and later when Donald Trump actually signed an executive order rooting critical race theory completely out of the federal government. And that was in September that he did that. And Joe Biden, after he was elected, immediately reversed, I think ignorantly so, reversed that executive order, which was simply reinstating that you could not discriminate against people based on their race and sex. So it was just race and sex stereotyping is really what they were addressing. And that kind of
what was the fallout then of mass emailing this illicit criticism?
So this, I expected it to be worse, but I think we were very careful. I expected to get fired immediately. I fully thought that I was putting my job on the line. We had worked our way into this position of a dream job, making $120,000 a year, and I thought, yeah, I'm about to get myself fired, and I have really no fallback plan other than I need to do what I see as right. I felt very morally obligated to do that. And so when the fallout actually came, they didn't really have a lot to work with to fire me. They put me immediately on paid administrative leave, which switched back to just being paid a full-time employee again within, I think, 1 week. And I was at home, and they put my security clearances under review. So they didn't allow me back on base, and had my security clearances under review for this emailing. They said I had put security at risk by putting this email out and having links in my email to YouTube to all the workforce. And for the next year and a half about, they kept me working from home on projects that I could not work on any top secret information. All my old projects went by the wayside. Someone else had to pick up the slack and take on those projects. And then for a year and a half, they were just reviewing this until February of this year. They were able to finally fire me for refusing to disclose my vaccination status to them, refusing the forced medical testing and the forced disclosure of medical test results to Sandia. And I don't consider myself someone that is, I did not do that based on being, I guess, any sort of anti-vax view. I guess that's the words being used for it. It was completely a infringement upon freedoms view. And I thought that it was a wild overstep what they were doing. And I drew a line in the sand. And just like before, I didn't think I would be finding myself fighting for our freedoms yet again with Sandia National Labs. But in our national laboratories, that's exactly the position that we were placed in. So after refusing that in February, they were able to fire us. And we had already been going back and forth, my wife and I, for, about a year, determining what was really next for us. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of crazy because after we blew the whistle, we had the opportunity to work with so many amazing people, so many amazing freedom warriors, people getting their voice out there, people we never thought we'd actually be talking to. And they deserve a ton of credit for this. Like people like Chris Rufo, who worked directly with us to blow the whistle on our national laboratories. And James Lindsay met with me immediately after we sounded the alarm. And he was pivotal in helping us understand what we were truly fighting and even inspiring us to eventually kind of leading us to what we're doing right now, which is we've started an organization that we think we've identified what we see as a very core problem for America and the core problem of what we're actually fighting. And it was funny because I was talking to James Lindsay about this. I called him on the phone after we started this, and we had been working 6 months to stand this up, and we just recently launched this organization. And I called James Lindsay on the phone, and I'm halfway through trying to explain this to him because, for most people, it's more complicated. And we're still in that beginning stages of an organization where you're trying to really hone in what to explain when you have a more complicated, complex mission of what you're doing and why it's so important. And he stops me about halfway through explaining and says, I don't think you realize how fundamental what you're starting here is. And then he went on to re-explain what we were doing back to me. And for Micayle and I, it was kind of like a breath of fresh air that finally we explained it to someone, and he seemed to understand it at a deep level almost immediately. And he uses, obviously deep academic terms and dives deeply into why what we're doing could be so critical. And so that was kind of one of those moments that, like an aha moment for us. Mm-hmm. But right after we blew the whistle, go ahead.
I guess we can go back to that now if you want to continue with the narrative. But what was the concentration or the essence of your organization? What is it? What is the thing?
Yeah, so our organization that we started is we called it Freedom. It's called Freedom Families United. And it's a nonprofit, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. And we actually, when we stood it up in all 50 states legally. And that in itself was quite the hurdle, especially since we're unemployed, have no real means. We're just, burning into savings and doing everything we can to stand up this organization and just the bureaucracy sorting through that. Yeah. But the core problem that we identified before standing up this organization that we're looking into is, over the years, America has had a breakdown in values. And I remember when we talked, the conversation, you just kind of, do your interview style, and the conversation led where it led. And I remember this is a week or two after I blew the whistle on our national laboratories. And I remember I started talking about values, and you dove deeper into that. And so we had this conversation about values immediately after I blow the whistle on our national laboratory. So I guess it's a little fitting now that I'm interviewing with you again here. And this organization that we started is a values-based organization. So if you look over the past decades in America, at every institution that used to transfer values from parents to children or reinstill values in children, even whether it's community centers, schools, churches in a lot of ways, or even TV and entertainment, right? You used to be able to sit children down in front of the television, and they would, more often than not, within 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, however long those kids are in front of there, they would relay some semblance of values that you agreed with to your children, or at least when we were sitting in front of the TV as kids, more often than not. And it seems like all of those institutions have either become corrupted or outright hostile towards our values. And we identified this breakdown, this severing of ties between parents to children, as being extremely dangerous, because you know probably better than many people that when this happens throughout history, this is kind of priming yourself for some type of totalitarian creep inside of a society, right? Those totalitarian regimes, no matter where they come from, which side they come from, those typically take the form of taking that individual and severing their ties from every single values-based organization and institution and individual, severing those ties and reestablishing those ties directly between the individual and the state. And a lot of people think that there's been, wild government overreach in the past years. And no matter which side you talk to, if you're talking to, I suppose, the far right or far left, both of them seem terrified of some sort of takeover or overreach from the governmental level. And I think the antidote to that is for us to stand up these types of organizations, reestablish and reinvigorate values-based organizations where we are meeting weekly in person, talking about our values, but most importantly, living our values, actually going out and doing something each week to live our values. There's plenty of people out there talking about the problem, talking about what values we need and what we think is good, but your actions speak a lot louder than your words, especially to children. So when we're meeting weekly as families and transferring values between families and strengthening our bonds to our children and doing these activities together, I guess what a lot of community centers and schools and churches used to do, and many still, there are still a lot of churches out there doing a lot of good, but you've of our generation leaving churches in mass numbers and now identifying as either atheist or agnostic. And I would personally say that Micayle and I identify more along the agnostic strain. And that's not a bad thing, but so many of our friends and family that we knew that left our church behind or other churches behind, they did not take the same approach that we did necessarily. We kind of went through a little bit of a crisis where we, for years, have gone through this. How do we transfer these values from us to our children? We used to meet weekly and talk about these things multiple times a week even. And so for us, it was kind of a natural evolution. And this blowing the whistle on our national laboratories is just the final spark that led to us creating this organization. I feel like, us being in the military in our life and leaving the church and having to find this for ourselves and constantly talking about values and having these family nights with our children over the years, this was the natural progression, is for us to create this organization that I truly do believe that it is a very timely organization, not something I might have started 10 years ago, but I feel like now this is needed more than ever before. This kind of reestablishment of values between parents and children. So
you use the word values, but what are you talking about? What values?
So essentially when we tried to create a framework of what we thought children would need to arm them for life, because we look at values as the armor and weapons that you would send kids out to the world with.
Okay.
And you don't necessarily need weapons and armor unless you live in a war zone. And I feel like that's what it's become for children, is a war zone. It's harder to parent kids now than ever before. Okay. And so we have 12 values. And the 12 values of Freedom Families United, and people can agree or disagree with these, but these have been, years in the making that we feel like established these within our own family, and saying this basic framework, if kids truly embodied these values, I think they would be prepared for life and have a worldview that would truly prepare them to be able to give back and fight whatever comes their way. And those values are in order here. We have freedom and equality.
Wait, courage. those are two. So the way that you're setting up values is that they're in dialogue with each other already. So freedom is not its own value. Freedom is paired in dialogue with equality.
So yeah, they are independent of one another, but we kind of pair them together. So we have 12 values and they pair nicely together. And so when I say freedom and equality, they are. Is that
value 1 and 2 or value 1?
Value 1 and 2. Value 1 would be freedom. Number 2, equality. Okay. And we can dive deeper into these, because I think it's important when it's funny explaining a list of values, because definitions now are so
very important.
Yeah, they're always seem to be changing. And so somebody else's definition of a value might be completely different. So any one of these you would like to dive into, we're more than happy. But this is what we thought was the most important. Freedom and equality, courage and discipline, family and presence, honesty and truth-seeking, gratitude and resilience, service and charity. And for example, just these first two values, like freedom, I look at that as kind of the basis of our organization, and not just the basis of our organization, but the basis of the worldview that any member of our organization or any child should be forming their worldview on. Those sort of basic freedoms. This is the first and highest core value of the organization. And it's the lens through which it allows us to see the rest of the world and our interactions between each other. And it allows us to identify what is right and wrong, especially when a central authority is involved, when we're determining what rights we give up to our government and what our relationship between us and our government and other authority figures are. Mm-hmm. And equality had to be in here, because equality paired with freedom really is, I think it really defines freedom more fully. And I look at equality as the antithesis to ideologies like critical race theory. Mm-hmm. Right? It's the best antidote to that sort of poison. And Dr. Martin Luther King preached equality, right? And he preached the equal opportunity for all men and women under the law, regardless of their race, sex, and any other immutable characteristics that they might have. And the more radical ideology that we see ourselves fighting really seems to despise that quote by Martin Luther King. Anytime you say the content of your character rather than the color of your skin. Yeah. But like it or not, that is what made Martin Luther King so famous to go down in history. That sort of ideology that we accepted wholesale from him and that we try to embody. And it's sort of that colorblind ideology that gets criticized all the time, where you are judging somebody just purely based on who they are as a person, not necessarily caring what they look like.
And that's our most important purpose for our organization, is creating a freedom community where we get back to where Americans, whether we agree on specific policy or not, we agree on freedom and we agree on equality. We agree on individual rights under the law. And we can come together on that and fight our local government, federal government, school boards, whatever it is we need to do to hold our leaders accountable. We can still come together on those two basic values.
They're very powerful. Freedom and equality, very powerful. I mean, we've been struggling with that for a couple centuries, and sometimes it goes pretty awfully awry because people interpret freedom and equality in a myriad of ways. But on the group level, one way that critical race theory sells itself is to point out that there are inequalities between groups. There are inequalities between opportunities. And when we establish a binary of equality of opportunity versus equality of outcome, that still gives the state or people who want to solve equality access to education, because if not everybody has the same education, they don't have equal opportunity. If not everybody has the same baby formula, or to even go like all the way back there, the outcomes between breastfed children and baby formula children, you can kind of plot that. So at what point do we ensure equality of opportunity? And
yes, and this is the wedge that was used to start ushering in the word equity, right? And the fact that the definition of equality kept stretching and stretching. And I would say from a freedom perspective, you look at it certainly from a equality of opportunity, and you argue that line, and that's extremely important, because that line will constantly get stretched. Like they will take and say, this opportunity is obviously not equal. You weren't born rich and this guy was born rich, or whatever it might be. But that's why you have to distinguish that, saying like your structures under the law, they have to be equal. And I would even look at something like education as being one of the most unequal things that we should be fighting for more equality inside of. When they constantly point out these disparities, they're always pointing to the wrong core problem. That's why I get so frustrated with some of them. But many disparities that are pointed out under critical race theory, I can't say many, but there are some very fundamental, especially when you come down to core educational opportunities for people that are poor versus people that are rich. That is something that at a state level, when you're funding schools based on property taxes, and a public school, one is doing extremely well for themselves and another is struggling, to me, that's the type of equality that we should be joining hands together with whoever disagrees with that, and helping to fight and correct that. And I've always told my children that this is a saying that we really like. We say equality and freedom go hand in hand, because inequality anywhere threatens equality everywhere. And you're right in saying like this, just the general term equality, if you don't define that, if you don't fully understand what it is and why it is so critical to have that as one of your core values, especially in 2022, right? Especially because I look at it as the antidote to critical race theory, to equity, when we're talking about what we need to be fighting for. Then if you don't fully define that, then obviously that term is going to get bent and twisted until equality is essentially equity, until they are trying to do forced equal outcomes.
Well, I mean, even there's a problem. Sorry to challenge you.
Oh, no, we appreciate it.
So we're having a good time here. Even there's a problem inherent in the statement or the value that inequality anywhere is a threat to equality everywhere. And one way that we can just really dramatically or explicitly point that out is American colonial neoliberal trying to export democracy everywhere, and America taking it upon itself to go out to other countries and give them equality, give them democracy. I know that didn't work out in reality, and I don't know if the people who use that phrase were acting with real good intentions or not, but there's still a seed of colonialism and a seed of almost elitism that your job is to go and to fix other people's problems. Your job is to go and stomp out equality everywhere. And it's a good thing. I'm not saying it's not a good thing. It's just there's a little bit of hubris if you don't kind of teach humility, but you guys have gratitude down the list, and I think gratitude and humility.
Yeah, and that's it. Like if you take it in a vacuum and this was your one value, right, you can see how this could get twisted and manipulated. If you're not constantly going through these and teaching these, like we're typically rotating through these on a weekly basis, sitting down and having family nights and talking about these, right? Because
Just one sub question. When you do family nights, is this you're meeting with other families, or is it just you're hanging out with your family?
Right now, this is our family. This is something we're going to encourage, in our organization and nationally. I think it's something that's extremely important. You turn your kids over between school and television and other entertainment. You're looking at probably 80 hours a week that somebody else is influencing your child. And very few parents sit down and have just one night that they block out to sit down, talk about values, try to give some sort of value lesson in the context of history, because you saw how complicated something as simple as equality can get just in this little conversation we had here. So you imagine trying to explain this and talk to your 8-year-old, your 12-year-old, your 16-year-old about these concepts, and you just expect them to absorb your values through osmosis, and you've never challenged them, you've never had the deep conversations with them, and so many parents seem seemingly shocked that their kids are turning against their values right and left. And so these family nights, we sit down, we talk to them, typically, starts out by asking them what they think these values are, if they have stories that apply to these values, from school or their friends or cousins or whoever it might be. And then a lot of times you'll accompany maybe a video that we found from, whether it's on online or a story we found online, maybe even watching a movie together, or even a historical documentary maybe. And then you finish out family night by sitting down and playing a game together, typically like a board game or something where you have to talk, communicate, something that I think gets lost. And a lot of parents don't really spend that sort of quality time with their children. And it's something that we need to reestablish. Set the electronics down, set the phones down, no other friends over for this day of the week. And we reconnect as a family and recharge as a family and talk about what we think is important. And sometimes those lessons are dictated by what happened that week. You might have had a week where kids told you particularly large amount of lies, and we need to have another lesson on honesty or something like that, right? And so a lot of times these lessons might change based on what is going on currently, but it's the fact that you're taking one night a week, and right before that, typically everything's crazy, and you stop and sit down, and Micayle and I look at each other and say, okay, what's the most important thing we need to be talking about this week with them? What do we do? What do you have on that? What do you want to talk about?
Well, so there is this sounds kind of like Bible study without a Bible. So what's the Bible? Is it just your own personal experience? Are you guys developing curriculum? Or are you just accumulating?
You could say that, I guess. If your Bible study is sitting down talking about values, you are using the Bible as the basis of that. But the basis for these type of family nights would be, that's why it's so simplistic. When I say 12 core values, a lot of people might scoff at that because you think about the philosophical underpinnings for a value and how deep this can go, right? But this is more or less like your basic training for a moral framework. That's what it is. Does that mean you're not going to have to dive in deeper, read some books from, more influential people, have sort of like these book clubs where you go over and compare and contrast complex ideas? That's obviously going to be necessary as a child develops and goes in the future. But if they always have this very simplistic base core of 12 core values and a way of seeing the world, like something they're living up to, then they have a target to a baseline to start at and something to work from. Because I can't possibly see, we're certainly not going to write a Bible tomorrow, but saying that there are 12 core values, it's kind of like, I guess Jordan Petersen talks about 12 rules for life. Yeah. Are 12 rules really going to cover absolutely every aspect of your life?
There was 10 commandments at one point. It did pretty well.
There you go.
So, I mean, it's a good shortcut is all it is. It's saying we're starting this organization and we wanted it to be a values-based organization. We knew that. So these 12 values that we established for this organization, I truly believe a lot of people might argue with some of the values we included or something we discluded. But I think a lot of the values that you might either, after they fully thought about it deeply and realized that a lot of these sub-values that we were trying to fit in there, realizing they fit under one or two other values, this does make an extremely strong moral framework for children to be able to prepare themselves to go out to the world in. Even something we talk about truth seeking, and that's one of those values that we kind of defined, and it's not as popular of a value. And the reason we included that, truth seeking specifically as a value, is because of modern technology. This is a value we may not have included, 20 years ago necessarily, but it's to say that you are going beyond journalistic standards. You are diving extremely deeply into not every subject, but whenever one of those core subjects come up that would change your worldview, something that you need to deeply understand, you have to not only understand your own arguments, but the other side's argument. You have to tear it down and understand it at a deeper level than even they understand it. You can't just passively consume information and just accept what you see as truth. And so truth seeking is probably one of the most high-end, complicated values that we have, because a lot of younger kids, truth seeking for them looks like getting a good education and developing their critical thinking skills, right? And then as you get to be an adult and a story comes out or something happens and you have to dig and dig to find out what the truth actually is, that skill is crucial now compared to, maybe living back in the 60s when your sources of truth were a couple newspapers that showed up on your doorstep. So I feel like it's much more complicated to be a truth seeker in 2022 than it would have been in the past. Or I guess the access to information makes it where there's more pitfalls, maybe, is a better way to explain it.
Well, and we only have so much time to figure out every given problem that we're presented with, or that the media tells us is what we need to think about. But did you guys say presence was one? Okay.
Yes.
Micayle, let's pretend that I'm like the kid and you're like, we have to talk to Ben about presence. Like, Micayle, how would you start
How would I talk to you about presence?
Yeah, where would we begin?
Well, I guess the specific scenario, a lot of times comes up for parents and adults, is we have these devices, right? We have the culmination of human knowledge at our fingertips at all times. And sometimes that's very distracting, whether it's social media or entertainment, from games to movies to, chatting with your friends constantly, texting 24/7. It's interfering with children, if it's interfering with your sleep cycles, kids can't put it down. You literally have to be able, to tell them no, to take it away, to help them find the good things in real life, like going outside, doing projects, spending family time together. So really it's about getting them off of those devices and being distracted constantly, having to constantly fill your brain with noise.
Yeah, but how would you convince me as a 14-year-old
14-year-old. Okay.
Let's say I'm 14 and maybe I'm missing out on some things, and then how would you start to convince me that this is a value that's actually good for me? So,
for example, we did have a few of our teenage nephews here a couple weeks back for cousins camp, and they all brought their devices, and we had a lot of activities planned. And so we planned an activity like at the lake, and where he said, we're going to put down our devices and we're going to go spend the day at the obstacle course on the lake. And we can take pictures and you can post it later. But right now, in this moment, it's going to be amazing. It's going to be a lot of fun. And it's very, teaching them the importance of relationships and how relationships are built. And you can't build an in-person relationship if you're completely distracted. And you can't have a true, deep conversation with the people around you, with the people that you love. You want to... you can have phone conversations and stuff like that, but the people in your life, usually your parents and your siblings, the most important people who are going to be here, from today until the day they die or until you die, you need to hang on to those relationships, make sure that you're attending to them as you need to, so that, throughout life, you have somebody that's always got your back. And that's what it means to be a family. That's what it means to be a part of a community. You need to learn to interact with people and look people in the eye and talk about the things that you believe, talk about those important things. Yeah. And depending on the teenager and what you're into, you might try to get them into a hobby that they're interested in, try to help them find outlets.
Yeah.
And we like the words of Zig Ziglar, right? He's the one that says love is spelled Time. And that's extremely important for presence, because you explain to our children, we say, how do you feel when somebody is in front of you and they're on their phone? You aren't that important to them.
Yeah.
And the greatest gift you could ever give the people that you love or care about, even friends, if you want them to feel important, the greatest gift you can give them in today's day and age is your time, is your attention. And it's extremely bad habit to be in front of somebody and have your phone up and not actually be present with them. So presence means being in the moment with them and not developing those bad habits where you have to always be on that device. You're never actually with someone when you're with them. So when we sit down and we eat dinner, when we're with the family, when we're having family time, there's extremely strict rules on being present. And this is like one of those things you have to teach by example as a parent.
Yes, object lessons.
Risk too.
That's excellent. I like the thanks for getting more and more concrete. We can talk about values all day, but like trying to teach it to a 14-year-old is like that's where rubber meets road, right? So were there other opportunities when you had cousin camp where you guys got to expand on a moment or talk about a moment with one of your cousins or nephews, nieces, and stuff like that?
No, there's tons
Quite
of moments,
a few.
right? And we're probably, it's funny. You can imagine coming to cousins camp at our house. We are definitely the very peculiar aunt and uncle to come to their house, and like we have values on the brain, and we are developing this organization. So even honesty, right? When we have a instance of honesty come up at cousins camp where somebody is lying about even simple things, we always find that like it's always the most important time, the best time to teach those values isn't at family night. Those are great times to remember and remind yourself. But it's when something happens, that is when it's the most important to teach a value. So we don't miss a moment. And so when there's like somebody has lied about what they did, or, I didn't do that, I didn't break that, whatever it is, we talk about honesty with them. And honesty is arguably one of the most fundamental of all of our values. And we thought about making this our first value when we originally formed these values. But our relationships to all of our friends and families, what's that?
You had to switch and bait. You had to get people with the freedom, and then like, honesty.
That's right. But we explain it to these children because a lot of times children are like, oh, don't lie. And we were always told, you don't lie in church because because God's watching, and it's a sin and going to hell and whatever. And in reality, our relationships to our friends and family, or even a higher power, if you want to take it that route, are the only reason we establish values in the first place, right? All relationships are built upon trust, and trust is just a byproduct of honesty. And honesty means that you have to speak the truth. You have to live the truth, and you can't tolerate any lies. And those you love should never question your honesty and integrity. And so for a child, when they lie to us, like our child might be lying to us about something, we find out, we say that broke our relationship at a fundamental level. And the next time something happens and we don't necessarily trust them or believe them, I've even gotten my, our children in trouble before. And when they're upset and say, I really didn't do it. And I say, well, I'm going to get you in trouble anyways, because you just lied to me like this morning, and I'm assuming you're lying now. This is the way trust works. You built the trust with me, therefore you have to deal with the consequences. And it helps to drill that in, saying like, honesty is at the foundation, good or bad, the foundation of every relationship that you have. And so at cousins camp, somebody would do something dishonest, and we take that quick moment to be like, look, do you want your cousin to trust you? Do you want them to believe you when you come tell them something important? Do you want them to have a stronger relationship or a weaker relationship with you? Honesty is important.
We always tell them every choice you make is contributing to your reputation, whether that reputation is developing towards being an honest and a person full of integrity, or if it's toward like a sneaky, conniving individual. You get to choose. Every choice you make builds towards a reputation one way or the other.
But you can't have both? Even a little?
Well,
I mean,
so with different people, maybe.
That seems like a difficult task.
Even during like Monopoly, if you guys play games, I'm sure there's, or Clue, there are opportunities to know how to lie. Maybe, I don't know. I'm sure you guys don't do Texas Hold'em on your game nights, but...
We haven't yet. No.
Yes. And that's another thing, telling children lies, like lies aren't just all created equally. You explain to them, like when you're lying to somebody you love, that is a betrayal of their trust in a major way. And even though you might be lying to someone you don't really know, if someone you love sees that, that can also violate that relationship. But like, a lot of times we were told growing up, all lies, it's all bad, you're going to hell, all these things. And you really have to break it down to kids and make them in their own head calculate, like, when they lie, what the actual effect is going to be, and what type of relationships they want to have, what type of person they want to be viewed as.
You guys, I wasn't able to write down all of them. I have like, I think I have 9 written down, but was forgiveness one of them? And if so, why not? Or if not, why so?
We did not forgiveness on here, and there was a lot of, you're going to do 12 values. We look into it. I think kind of if you were to place it under somewhere, you would look at your forgiveness. You can talk about that in the context of being grateful, right? Like looking at life with through the lens of gratitude. And so just because these are our 12 values doesn't mean there's not opportunity to talk about other values. Mm-hmm. And when it comes to forgiveness, that's obviously one of these core values that's important when you say gratitude and resilience. Can you really be a grateful, resilient person if you are holding grudges against people and not forgiving them, right? Mm-hmm. Like, are you going to be a better, stronger person for holding this grudge and always looking at somebody for something they did in the past, even if they come asking for forgiveness? I truly believe if you embody these 12 values, so many other values just fall into place based on your worldview. That you get confronted with a value and you want to say, what's my opinion or thoughts on forgiveness? It'd be very obvious if you're somebody that lives all 12 of these values that you would be the type of person that would be forgiving.
I bring it up because in the context of imbuing these values to kids, your family, you're always having to instilling the values is, you brought up, like, I'm going to get you in trouble now. There is punishment, there is consequences, but there's also an understanding of the human being as somebody that you are developing. And so to not teach them or to not forgive them yourself, or always be in a state of forgiving them, even when you're disciplining them, is how the values remain roomy enough for the kid who gets in trouble, but is always feels that they're loved, right?
Of course, yes. Exchange. Well, and we have service, right, as one of ours. And so I would say if we're honest with ourselves and we tell them, right, we tell them our goals for them. You know, our goals for you are to make you healthy, smart, successful. We want to give you the tools you need to succeed in life, to be a leader, or to be an entrepreneur, to be whatever it is that you want to be. And so we don't want to do anything, that is going to handicap you or leave you unknowledgeable. And so it is out of a place of loving. And if we're honest with them, we tell them we make mistakes too. And we have to learn from those mistakes and grow from those mistakes. And so, forgiveness is a very honest conversation because everybody makes mistakes. And we all have to be forgiving of each other because it's just reality.
Yeah. And with honesty, like I use that example of like you could lie to you that morning and then you use that opportunity to teach them again about honesty. Say, well, I don't trust you this time and you're in trouble anyways because I think you did this. I think you're lying again. Right. That would be an opportunity to like reinstill honesty. But at the same time, right, that we are very, very quick to forgive. And we explain that to our children, like, okay, we're starting back at zero, we're frustrated and all that, but like, it's a clean slate now. Yeah. We're rebuilding trust and you're going to rebuild it one little piece at a time. So, there is that balance with all these values. Really, the only reason we would ever do something like that, with the honesty where your kid still gets in trouble is because it kind of drills it into their mind of what honesty is. Honesty is more about that trust and relationship. It helps them make that connection. It's not because we're just trying to punish them and be mean. It's because we're really trying to highlight that to them and have them embody that value for the right reasons, not just because they're afraid they're going to get in trouble, but because they're looking at that as like, oh, relationships. I don't get more opportunities with other friends, but I get more opportunities with my parents. Yeah.
You bring up in trouble, and that's culture specific. What that actually means. So you guys don't have to reveal what you mean by in trouble. But what is being in trouble? What does that mean?
It usually means a long conversation about values.
That's punishment enough for a 9-year-old. I'll tell you what.
There you go.
Yeah. So,
He's like, please make me do chores. Don't talk to me anymore.
we have, I mean, we have very strict rules and extreme consistency with our rules, right? And they have plenty of freedom as well. And every single decision we make for them is based on, like, is this going to make them a better future adult, somebody that we're going to actually be proud of and want to be friends with when they're a future adult. And that's how we make all our decisions.
Okay. And I guess you're going to figure out, so your kids age 9, 10, and then you have
9 and 12.
9 and 12. Okay. So this is an interesting question, and I know it's completely dependent on the child and on the age and your relationship and the context of what's going on in the greater world. But are you not trying to give them freedom and understanding the process of allowing them to be free and transferring your strictness to their own? Yeah, it's
I think one of the most successful things you can do for a child to both, help them, because children need strict boundaries, and they need strict boundaries to a point. So when your child is born, I look at it as just essentially a V. From the moment they're born, they have almost no rights. Everything they do, everywhere they are, everything they touch is you are controlling. As they get older and older, those rights continue to expound. So, for example, our daughter, who's 12, does not have the same restrictions that our 9-year-old son does. And that is based primarily upon their age, and then secondarily upon them showing us how responsible they might be and how they're embodying those values. And then our goal is never you don't go backwards. You're always expanding, giving them more and more freedoms. And by the time they're reaching 16, 17 years old and they're in your home, they should have about 100% freedom to fail inside your home. You should be constantly, like, even giving them a cell phone. Our daughter's coming to that age where, for us, we've been restricting that, but coming to that age where we're going to be getting her a cell phone and there'll be extreme restrictions on it. She'll know about them. We'll be very forward with what type of restrictions and monitoring there are. And as she gets older and older, we'll release those as she shows responsibility. And then by the time she's 16, 17, she has to have that opportunity to be like fully responsible and have full freedom to fail while she's at home. While the cost of failure is low enough, we give her that opportunity to fail and correct and be there as a friend eventually and not as a parent before she leaves home. But as of right now, both of our children have parents, not friends. We are first and foremost, that is our primary duty. And they get more and more freedoms, each and every day. And rarely do we ever walk back any of their freedoms. They're ready for them. We give them,
unless they get
more
in trouble,
leeway
right?
in every. Yeah, if they get in trouble, sometimes our boy lost pretty much everything in his room the other week, about a month ago, everything, and refused to clean up. And we told him, well, we're done with this. Whatever's not cleaned up, we're taking. And that's what happened. And he lost it for about a month and had none of his things, which that's a restriction of his freedoms. But also we were very clear with our expectations, very measured in what happened first, second, third, and then came the result. Right? And see that firm. I really like the book Strong Father, Strong Daughter, and it also applies to your sons. That firm hand is needed. These children have to have boundaries, and on the other side of that coin, they have to have that freedom at some point. You do not want them going out in the world and failing massively when the stakes are so much higher. You want them to learn those lessons at home before they leave.
Who wrote Strong Father, Strong Daughter? Do you recall? That sounds like an interesting.
Oh, I don't have that off the top of my head.
Well, if anybody's on the internet and they're listening to this right now, which is probably everybody who's listening to this right now, Strong Father, Strong Daughter, they can look it up. But
yeah, that's a really good one. My oldest brother actually recommended it to me, and he has 4 daughters. So he's read it a few times now.
So, not that you guys necessarily need to create a Bible or something like a Bible, but this is an opportunity insofar as you have created an organization to use that organization or to develop curriculum within that organization for people to see the values in action and to get some ideas and reading lists and stuff. So do you perceive yourselves creating content based around this, videos and maybe cousin camp curriculum that you can have on your website or something like that?
Yes.
So that's the end goal, is that we are able to create this, under the nonprofit. Of course, everything that we want to be able to create, we want to place it under there and run this nonprofit as something that we'd be proud to look at, and proud of what we created. If we look back on our lives and see something that outlives us, that would be our vision and our goal. And we want to create even content talking about something as simple as these 12 values, and other content based on marriage, like marriage advice and things like that. I think that's something that Freedom Families United organization would have. We have a Freedom Families United channel we just started. We just kicked that off, and we're just tuning in exactly what the exact right content balance is over there. And so between marriage, parenting, and talking about your 12 values, actions of the week, right? Like, what did we actually do to live those values? That's something important to put out, saying like, this is what you should be doing this week. This is what we have personally done this week to fight back or, address this problem that we pointed out to you. And that.
Are you guys going to live stream your arguments?
Go ahead.
Are you guys going to live stream your arguments when you guys get in trouble with each other and you just like...
We certainly could. We are very weird. I'm not going to say we never have an argument, but
very rare.
Our arguments, a lot of people would probably scoff at them and laugh at them. We've always had a extremely strong relationship, and that's been a good thing for us. But also that means that we have to dive in and understand some other people's dynamics. Like, I have never once called her a name our entire marriage or relationship.
Not even like honey or dear?
Hasn't. Yeah.
And I've known her since she was 12 years old. And I've never once called her a bad name. And we have always...
I was 14. I think you met when I was 14.
14? Yeah. Okay, 14. Whenever it was. Sometime we met and we got married. We've been dating since juniors in high school. And I have a deep respect for her. And I have yet to see a relationship that I look at that I see as being like stronger or something to aspire to, because we have always looked at our relationship as the most important thing that we can do. Because our relationship comes first, and then our relationship overflows into our children and our family. If we're not right with each other, then we can't possibly go out there and parent our children how they need to be parented. We can't give them the support, back each other up like needs to happen to be able to raise these children in the 21st century, which is, I believe, much more difficult than raising children in the past.
Well, I mean, there's less fatal diseases on at least on one metric.
That's true.
No. So going forward, what's the next step then? You guys have started up a channel. You're getting out the word. When we started, you said that you guys are yearning for like more community. It sounds like you guys are slightly isolated at this point. How do you imagine making connections and making a network with other families?
So we've made a lot of like political connections, and we've been going that front, but really we want to start bringing in all of the families. And so we have some, but we need to start meeting more frequently. And obviously we're going to start advertising. We have a couple of community centers we're looking at meeting at now. So we have location, and then we just have to find the right families to come in. So basically it's just marketing and then setting a date and getting it rolling. And then it will snowball from there.
And we've been finding space to actually sit and meet in person. And if we could snap our fingers and overnight be meeting in person and have the types of numbers we would want to be able to spread the word on the ground, that would be ideal. But I would say, unfortunately, but I'm trying to shift my perspective here. So I would say, fortunately, we get to create a YouTube channel and become sort of influencers as well. And it's kind of this learning curve where we have to learn to enjoy the aspect of satisfying audience expectations, especially when we set what the expectations are at the beginning. People come to our channel looking for advice on raising a family, looking for values, looking for us talking about our marriage, looking for talking about an update on what is the most important things that we see affecting families today. When we set that narrative and we set the expectations of what we're going to live up to, I can look at that as a great net positive for what we're creating right now. And that online community is able to overflow to in-person meetings. And anybody that wants to, they can, go on our website and actually start up a branch themselves. So if they are inspired and they really like what we're doing and they look up and they don't have a branch in their area, they can actually go and, contact some of their friends and or family or whoever in their area and say, do you want to be meeting up in person and doing this? And, here's some examples of what we'd be doing. And that would give them the opportunity to form their own communities. But this eventually, it takes the form of us not only teaching values and things, but actually meeting in person weekly and, forming these smaller groups that are able to address specific concerns of, smaller communities inside of our overall community, and teaching and passing off fundamental life skills to children. This is just like what you would expect from the stronger communities that we have seen in the past that have dissolved. We're not doing anything new necessarily. It's just maybe new and novel in the fact that it's a secular solution that has a little bit more of an activism aspect to it. The fact that we are actually getting out and trying to live our values, trying to teach kids that you don't just see a problem and do nothing about it. You have to get together and address the problem when you see a problem.
When you told the story of James Lindsay saying, that's what you guys need to do, and being slapping you on the back in a very accommodating way or encouraging way. I feel that too. Our first conversation 2 years ago now, I think, almost, was about critical race theory, and you were embattled and you're on your feet, you're taking a lot of risks and you're fighting this big bad. At this point, the energy that you're giving me is a lot stronger. It's like a fresh wind, or it's like a strong breeze, because you guys are going after the good. You're chasing the good rather than fighting or fleeing the bad. And I think that's a profound shift that needs to happen in reality for any of these problems that we discuss about to actually be resolved. So it's great that you guys are going in this direction.
Well, we are doing both. Just for the record, we have, so the critical race theory in schools is pretty bad here in New Mexico, but it's not quite enshrined in statute yet. And so we've got some workings going on. We're still fighting critical race theory on the ground, and trying to make a difference in that regard. But we see the solution, like you said, in the good. And so we have to do both.
And I think it's been a perspective shift for us in a major way, because where before we were maybe like upset and fighting and that more reactionary, now we're looking at, okay, well, what are we fighting for, not what are we fighting against? These are the values we're fighting for. And right now, this is what's happening in our schools. Therefore, we need to do this. And even part of it is, critical race theory has brought in certain aspects that might be good. They're saying, we need to address certain kids don't have access to internet or whatever it is. You're not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater here. You're going to address the problem intelligently and say, no, we are fighting for equality. We do not want our kids raised to be judging people based on the color of their skin. This is what we want, and this is what we demand, and that's what we're fighting for. We aren't necessarily just fighting against one ideology. We don't win in the long run that way. We just, have constant battle after battle.
I've been obsessed with this YouTube channel that has been around for a while, and I just discovered him because people said, you should go listen to the Distributist. He's kind of a dissident right thinker, crotchety, and doing a lot of teardowns of cultural problems. He doesn't think that the left or progressivism is necessarily a good thing, but he's a brilliant guy, but he never says what a distributionist is, actually. And it actually means that from what I gather from one of his friends, and I will have him on the channel at some point, but I bring that up because there's a one set of values that says that the individual is the building block of society. And that's kind of the value set that we've been running on. And a lot of our American power and also failure comes down to reducing everybody to individuality or to the individual and making everything very self-centered and very atomized. Distributionism is about the family being the fundamental building block of society, right? It shifts and it spreads the dynamic, and it also makes more sense in the context of individuals actually don't just come out of nowhere and are just rational actors. They come from families. And so I think that, I don't know why I bring that up other than to say that it seems like you guys are doing something like that on a theoretical level, on a practical level. That's kind of what it sounds like you're doing. And also on a societal level, if you go back and you read Tocqueville, this French guy came to America in the very early days of America and described America as these small communities all shaping their own reality together and finding common values together. And that made America something very different than what was in Europe and other parts of the world. So it sounds like you guys are rebooting the core American. You're bringing the American values just a step back toward family and community and small government, and then federal government and stuff.
And that's definitely our goal, because you constantly have people on the right just shout out and say like, oh, small government. And they don't really understand it themselves what that means, because really the smallest government would be a single authoritarian figure telling everyone what to do, right? Like that is the least amount of employees you could ever have in the government. And really what they're saying, without understanding it maybe, is decentralized government. That's really what we're going for. And you're saying you are taking power from this more centralized authority and stealing it and distributing it down. I guess at the most base level, you're not even doing that, right? Because at the most base level, you're saying, well, their authority actually comes from the smallest unit, which is the individual, which is part of the family. And the family is the smallest form of government that we have in the United States or in any country. And then it goes up from there. And so you're trying to empower these smaller forms of government and actually take power from these larger bodies that don't know what's going on in your personal life, in your personal family, your personal schools and communities, and trying to bring power back to the families and the individuals. So
the thing about trying to smash the government or anything like that is that somebody's got to govern something. And if people are not taking personal responsibility and investing in their community and participating in government at the local level, that means somebody else is in control. So fostering civil engagement is, again, it's another aspect of what you guys are teaching that might be implicit in how you teach it. Just like forgiveness is something implicit in how you're teaching these other values, and civic engagement. No, you guys say service, so it is explicit in your value set.
Yeah, and that's one of our main things in order to spread our message. We can't just build an online community. And so we thought about what can we do in person that actually will help us build these communities and get freedom-loving individuals to start paying attention. And one of those things we talk about a lot is, community service projects. It's going to benefit everyone, no matter your political ideology, your religious, determination, and any number of those things. We just are here. We're in this world together. Like, if we want our, I don't know.
Yeah, and then with these service projects, when you're doing service projects, but you might be doing them for a cause, I kind of look at this as being beneficial on all fronts, because if somebody else is upset and they're against your cause and they see you doing a service project, they might get out there in response to you and actually start serving the community for their side of the argument. And if that is how we're battling things out in our public spaces,
by doing good,
I mean, how much better off are all of us for that? We've seen it on both sides. Like somebody, even cleaning up a city elicits a response where everyone's extremely upset that they're doing it in the name of a politician. I say, I wish every politician would do that, but while they're running for office, they're doing
something
nothing but
good
serving
for their communities. Yes.
Yeah.
And so I would like to see people actually living their values in a major way, and trying to not just ask them, like, we're always complaining, always having, somebody talk about what the problem is. It would be nice if the norm now became, well, what have you done about that recently? What did you do to address that? Do you know this is a problem for how long now? And you've done nothing about it? There should be a sort of shame if you're seen as someone that like identifies these problems, but you have done nothing but complain about them and go vote maybe now and then. If we're going to change something, it's going to take a lot more. And I guess I want to highlight one more value, if you don't mind.
No.
Because I see this value as being extremely important for today, especially with our youth. And if this is the only part that somebody in your audience might catch of us that has kids, this is one of those values that I think might get overlooked or misunderstood at times. And that value is gratitude. And everyone kind of nods their head talking about gratitude, saying like, yeah, of course, gratitude's good. Have that attitude of gratitude. And it's funny because she takes that perspective on gratitude much more often than me, where she looks at gratitude as this sort of make a list of all the things you're happy for, always be happy no matter what, find the good in things.
Look for the opportunities.
That's right. And I think of it not as just a positive state of mind. I think that gratitude is a tool for overcoming life's darkest moments, most depressing moments. That is when gratitude is the most powerful in my mind, because I often have told myself that better people have gone through far worse. And that's kind of like that stoicism or perspective. But this simple and powerful perspective that I've used in my life has pulled me out of my lowest lows so many times. Just simply putting things in perspective and teaching children the power of gratitude. Like when do they need to engage that most? When do they need to kick that value in? Teaching them that when you are feeling down, feeling hopeless, feeling like all is lost, stepping back and, if you have to tell yourself, better people have had it worse than I have, is this a first world problem? And then after you've pulled yourself from that moment, maybe start making that list in that moment of saying like, okay, I have this, I have that, and really put things in perspective. That's why we paired gratitude and resilience together, is because resilience is impossible without gratitude. And so I just really want to highlight that, because with the child suicide epidemic and the depression rates shooting through the roof from social media use and all the other influences in kids' life, I feel like that's something that parents should really sit down and have frequent lessons with their children about, especially when they're reaching those teen years where they're at such high risk of slipping into these, illogical type of depressions for things that really aren't that important. They really need to teach and instill that sort of perspective and gratitude, ideology, mentality inside of their children.
Mm-hmm.
It also is a good basis of courage, too.
Oh, yeah.
Because you not only compare yourself to people in the past in order to kind of give yourself perspective, but also to say, well, what about you? What are you going to do about this? So...
Yeah, I agree. And it's funny because just sitting down talking to you, we get talking about values, and I say, oh, just one more. It's like one of those things that we can go on a dozen values and talk hours about them. And to me, it's just so obvious what is missing when you see children, especially, we have our cousins come, and they don't not just them, most of them are growing up to be pretty well-rounded kids and have good parents that care about them, but they come and talk about their friends and their peers and things like that. And you just see this void, and it's growing at such a rapid rate, this void of values, where these children are kind of emptying themselves from meaning and purpose, right? These kids feel extremely hopeless with what's happening and feel powerless against the world with everything. They turn on social media and they want to become something new every day, and they're never enough. And this lack of values is just eating our children alive. Literally, it is killing children right and left. The suicide epidemic is every single year seems to be breaking new records. And the further social media spreads and the more influential it gets, the next platform that comes out, I'm sure, will be more time consuming, more addicting than the last. It seems like this problem just keeps compounding itself. And I mentioned that parenting used to be easier than it is now. And it's true for the most part, because you think back maybe in the 60s or, whatever, you would have, if a child was irritating you or you didn't have patience for them or time or your energy, you might tell them, hey, go outside and play with your friends, get out of here. But now you hand them this device that has the sum of human knowledge and depravity on it, and you set them off over here in a corner, and then you're seemingly shocked when they fall into this depression or turn directly against your values and what you've been trying to teach them every now and then when you get the opportunity to. Never taking the time to sit down with them, talk to them, deeply instill these values within them.
Yeah. Several of our nieces and nephews from hundreds of miles apart at junior high ages that have phones, they literally have the TikTok outline and buttons burned into their phones because their apps, the TikTok app has been open for so long. And they said it was all of their friends, so many kids at their schools like it's like funny to them. And I think we had quite a few
that was
conversations.
very new to us. We just learned this.
Yeah, I didn't know that was a thing that could even happen on your phone. And they were telling us how common it was with these junior high, young high school kids. And we had a good long talk with our nieces and nephews about how that's terrible and the dangers of social media. And so again, it was an opportunity to talk about values, but it is really sad to see that they spend so much time isolated with a device, with a screen, instead of with another person. Or with
that being the case, that it's shocking and probably bad. It's also a market that you guys should probably consider tapping into.
We know. Oh my gosh. We are not looking forward to it, but we're looking for the positive in that. Yes.
No, we have to reach them where they are. And even some of our nieces and nephews were, consuming some information that was adjacent to values-based information. So we have to try to create that type of content and reach them. And even, our children can be pivotal in that, saying, oh, do you want to try your hand at making some content that might benefit some of your peers? Mm-hmm. And so it really is this, that's why we're Freedom Families United. We're going to be a lot stronger the more members that join. We're not the ones that have all the great ideas and we just run it one way. As we get more members, get better ideas, this is going to continue picking up steam like a locomotive. And our vision is to have this spread nationwide, to have this spread across the nation, and have anybody that wants access to an organization like this, they will be able to either form one themselves or go join one locally. Mm-hmm.
I do have to say that your the core value of your organization, as well as the core of the energy that you're presenting me, is outside stuff. It's not talking head stuff so much. I know there is a lot of opportunity. I'm not saying don't do talking head stuff, but if you guys are going to do media, I think being outside and engaging and showing that engagement is one way to kind of wake up the audience and say, oh yeah, remember, we're not just in Plato's cave. There's this whole like reality sun thing out here. So I just say don't, that's another.
And we've talked about that as well. How much content, what's the mixture of like actual current events content that we're discussing versus, values-based. And it's a lot of times covering this just in a new way, right? Just like we talk about the child that is maybe made a mistake, and that's the opportunity to talk about the value. The same thing's true when we see something come in the public eye that's currently relevant. That's the time to talk about a value, not just in a vacuum by itself. You have to apply it to these current events and continually reiterate why these things are so important as they come up. And it's funny. We've had people ask us, like, oh, do you have a fallback plan? Like, what else are you doing? Like, this seems pretty risky. And it is, because, I left behind a pretty good paying job, like $120,000 a year there at Sandia with a master's degree for an electrical engineer. And then we take on this venture that seemingly, you look anywhere in the near future, it doesn't seem to have any sort of monetary payout, and it's painful. But to me, that payout really comes in keeping my eye on that future, where I see how many children are we going to be able to save? How many children are we going to be able to help? How many families are we going to be able to connect to each other? Mm-hmm. Families that are feeling helpless, or like, just watching the news and feeling like this wave, this tsunami is coming at them and they have no way to fight back. And I think of what we can provide to them and what we can become. And to me, I really don't care if we end up, becoming poor, living in a camp trailer for years before we're able to make.
Have you spoken with Micayle about this?
Extensively. She had full buy-in for all this. So
okay, so she's like ready. You guys already have a camper plan C for camper.
Sure. We've talked about like fallback plans and what we can do to keep this going. Because the point is, like, are we going to try to start an organization like this that's maybe more difficult and stumble and make mistakes, and then go ahead and just go back to the normal workforce and let this just fall by the wayside? If we really think this is the most important thing and we are really that dedicated to it, before we even broke ground on this, we had some very complicated discussions about what could be and how hairy things could get, and saying, what are we willing to sacrifice? And what are we fighting? Like that really is the question. If we think that we are fighting for the future of our children and the future of the children of this nation, and not only this nation, right? This is sort of a global movement of tearing apart families and tearing down these structures of the individual and family unit of government and trying to destroy those values. If we really think we're rebuilding that, what are we willing to sacrifice today to stop that? So many of these patriots, Micayle and I were laughing with each other. I think just yesterday morning, we're saying like so many of these patriots talk about the possibility of a authoritarian regime taking over and them having to take up arms against the government. And they're acting like they're going to be out there putting their life on the line for their family when they're completely unwilling to put their job on the line for their values today.
Seemingly unwilling.
Yeah, they are completely kidding themselves. We have an epidemic of cowardice in this nation. And so that kind of tells us, we put it into perspective. We say, if I'm literally willing to die for these values, if these values truly one day in the future got threatened in that sort of extreme way, if I was willing to die for those in that distant tomorrow, wouldn't I be willing to live and fight for them right here today? And to me, that kind of gives us the courage and bravery we need to be able to, run into this unknown that we're taking on with this organization and take up this mission that seems larger than life to me. But we were looking to our right and left and we say, if not us, then who? And there's nobody else stepping up to do what we thought was so critical. So, if we're sitting here preaching action and this wasn't happening, then we're pretty hypocritical to not step into it and try to make it happen ourselves. And so regardless of what sort of time or sacrifice this takes on our end, we have made that vow to each other that we are in this till the end. And that regardless of what happens, our kids are going to be able to look back at this period and see what we sacrificed and what kind of struggles they had to go through because of our sacrifice, and that they will be able to be proud of what we put on the line for our values, for our what we look at as a mission first organization, and not be self-serving and shrink back into the background when the call comes to us, comes to our doorstep. We're ready to step up. We're not going to back down from it.
So how can people find your work? Because that's what you guys need. You need people to know. So where do they go?
freedomfamiliesunited.com is our current website. And yes, we are aware of the acronym FFU. It is kind of the part of our marketing as well. We said, this organization is the FFU to kind of that rising totalitarianism, all those that would oppose these values and try to tear down your family. And so we did try to get FFU.com, but that's going to take a little while longer. They wanted a $25,000 for FFU.com.
And we are on Facebook and we are on YouTube, and we probably will end up getting an Instagram and a TikTok, and we've even convinced ourselves we'll try to do some like funny skits to try to, make fun of what not to do and what to do. And that'll be entertaining.
Whoever wants to join, if you follow the Freedom Families United YouTube channel and go to freedomfamiliesunited.com, you are in for a ride. It might be a little bumpy at times, but just know that we are dedicated to this cause. And we think that what we are doing is extremely important to the future of this nation and the future of our children. And at the very least, I think that we would like to immediately get on giving those parents a hand up. That's our very first goal, is that any parent that is touching base with our organization, even if it's just on YouTube, they're going to find that resource, that help that they need to be able to be a stronger parent, a stronger husband, a stronger wife, and strengthen that family unit, and, be a little informed along the way rather than consuming all information from everywhere and trying to sort through it. We would like to kind of give what we see as the most important things threatening our freedoms, threatening our families, and threatening our children. And so it's we're very excited for this organization to be kicking off, and we're very honored to be on here with you and talking about this again. You giving us the opportunity to talk to you after 2 years about values here. It's just kind of funny how these things unfold. I would have never predicted that this is what we would be doing at this point in our life, but somebody has to.
Well, it was wonderful to hear again from you, and also to hear you both and what you're doing now. It's I had a smile on my face, and people might interpret that as me mocking you, but it's not. It's just like there's something about you guys that emanates joy.
Well, good. That's very high praise. I appreciate it.
You can mock us too. It's okay.
Okay. I just don't want to get in trouble.
Yeah. That's right. Upset some of your audience there. No, it's been great. We're definitely looking forward to the upcoming weeks, and we have a lot of stuff lined up for growth, and other people to talk to get the word out. And that's probably the hardest thing here, is making sure that we can spread the word. And the more people we get on board with us, the more they can help with that. And I know that was absolutely pivotal when we were blowing the whistle on critical race theory. So many of the audience members and people at Sandy and other people were the people driving, saying, "You need to talk to so and so. Oh, here I've sent your information to so and so." And that's the type of thing we need now, is that sort of community, building this up, building each other up, and sharing this. So we thank you for this opportunity. Yeah. And it's always great.
I'm sure people will be attracted to what you guys are doing. They just need to be presented with it. So I'm more than happy to put you in their path some way or another.
No, thank you. We appreciate it.
Yes, thank you so much.